Look, it's no secret that books are one of the best ways out there to learn new things and change your mindset.
What?
Honestly, don't you two read?
But let's face it, there's a lot of books out there. In fact, according to UNESCO estimates, more than 2 million new titles are published each year. And the truth is, while there are a few gems out there, there's a lot of books that are just not worth your time, despite being hyped like crazy in the personal finance community. Now, I've personally read close to 100 books in the world of finance, mindset, and self-help, and I've even written my own book about my journey from starting a side hustle to becoming a millionaire myself. So I'll be sharing my perspective on books that influenced my personal finance journey, my business, and even my own book. But I also am going to be calling out a few books that are simply overrated, in my opinion. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button to join our personal finance community and keep the conversations going. To keep things simple, we're going to be looking at 6 personal finance books that I've read many times before. These are all titles that you've heard of before, starting off with Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. This is the very first personal finance book that I read for the first time when I was about 12 years old, and then again when I was in my early 20s, and I took it a lot more seriously on my second time through it. The book is written in simple and relatable language, and with a title like this, it's no surprise as to why it has become so popular. This book looks at 2 very different approaches to money and success, studying his 2 father figures, his rich dad and his poor dad. In this book, you learn important lessons, such as how the rich don't work for money, and instead they put their dollars to work for them through investments, passive income, and things like that. It also takes some shots at the traditional education system, saying that it's not teaching financial literacy. And financial literacy simply means that you're informed to make smart financial decisions, and part of that is knowing about assets versus liabilities. Kiyosaki believes that you should buy assets, like businesses and income-producing real estate, and then avoid liabilities, like a big single-family house that produces no income. So let's get into the pros and cons here, starting off with the pros. The biggest pro here, in my opinion, is the mindset shift that this book can provide. Personally, it made me realize when I was working as a utility worker that I didn't want to do that forever, and instead I ought to start my own business and then do things like investing in real estate. And that's really exactly what I did, and I ended up investing in real estate for the first time back in 2019. I like how this book challenges the go to school and get a job narrative, because I know for me growing up, it seemed like that was the only path out there, and it just didn't really seem like something that I really wanted to do for my entire life. Another pro here is this book really does help you understand the difference between assets and liabilities, and I know for me, when I read this for the first time, I didn't realize that a lot of the stuff that I had in my life was technically a liability, even though I might have thought that it was an asset. Overall, this book lays the foundation here for understanding how wealth is built at a high level. I also like the entrepreneurial vibe of this book, and that's really what got me motivated to start my YouTube content business, as I saw it having a high potential to earn passive income, and I know that passive income was also a hallmark of this book, so this literally was part of what helped me choose to become a YouTuber. But with that said, there are some obvious cons to this book, and the biggest one in my opinion is it simply lacks practicality. The best way to put it is this book is more of a how to think about your money versus here's what to actually go do with your money, so it can kind of leave readers feeling fired up but not knowing what the next step is. Another con here is potentially controversial financial advice. Some critics argue that the book simplifies complex topics and may lead inexperienced readers to misunderstanding risk. For example, the push towards real estate and debt is not right for everybody, especially if you don't fully understand these strategies. For me personally, I have had a lot of success with the practices that he talks about, going out and starting a business, focusing on passive income, and then investing in real estate. But a lot of this has to do with timing, and if your timing isn't good with these things, you could also have a really bad experience. Another con here is the book at this point is a little bit dated here in terms of the explanation and the overall style. The book was written in the late 1990s, so you are going to notice that as you're going through it. So with that said, guys, it's time to put a ranking on Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and this is an easy one for me, guys. This is obviously an A-tier book in my opinion. The only reason why this book isn't S-tier for me is because it has lost a bit of relevance here since being published over 30 years ago. But if you've never read the book before, I think it's an absolute must read in the personal finance community, and because it's so popular, you might even even find it right at your local library. This next book here is one that I read after one of my business partners recommended it to me, and it's a book that his father had him read before joining the family business, and that book is The E-Myth Revisited by Michael E. Gerber. In a nutshell, this book is basically a guidebook for small business owners, especially those that are struggling to scale and grow their operations. Because what often happens in a small business, and what has happened in my own ventures, is that the business owner or business owners get so caught up in the day-to-day operations of the business that nobody's focusing on the actual business itself and all of the other tasks that are involved. This book breaks down 3 distinct roles that are a part of every business and, more importantly, every entrepreneur out there. You have the technician who's actually doing the work, and then you have the manager who plans, organizes, and makes sure that everything is running smoothly. And finally, you have the entrepreneur who focuses on the vision, the strategy, and the growth of the overall operation. Above all else, what this book teaches you is that you need to build systems that allow your business to run without your constant involvement. So let's start out here with the pros, one of them being this big idea of the technician versus the entrepreneur. Here's the thing, just because you're good at doing the work, aka being the technician, that does not mean that you're ready to go out and run the business. It's like the difference between working as a plumber and then running a full-blown plumbing business. So this book really hits home for people who have experienced entrepreneurial burnout, which can happen to anybody, but it's also common with freelancers, side hustlers, and solopreneurs, because you're just doing everything yourself and it's not sustainable in the long run. Finding a balance between the work, the vision, and the strategy is key here, and this book is going to help you with exactly that. Another pro here is that this book emphasizes building systems over hustling like crazy. So instead of telling you to go out there and put in an 18-hour day in your business, it's saying put the systems together so that way you don't ever have to go and do that. And this is a crucial mindset shift for anybody who's looking to build something that is scalable. And another pro here is that this book applies to all sorts of different types of businesses. So it doesn't matter if you're a small business, a brick and mortar, a digital business, the principles apply to every business operation. And I've also found that this idea of systems applies well to your personal life too, because you can build systems to automate things in your own life like auto bill pay and things like that, just to eliminate your thought and activity that has to go into these things. But with that said, we do have to get into a couple of cons here, to be fair. And the first one is that this book is a bit repetitive and, dare I say, over-explained at certain points. Some critics say this could be explained in half the pages, and honestly, guys, that's the only criticism I have for this book. It can be a little bit lengthy, but it's really not too bad, and if you look at it, it's physically not even the biggest book here on this table by far. So that's really kind of a hard critique of this book here, just to have something to have as a con. Now, before I go ahead and give this a rating on our tier list, guys, I need you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and put this firmly in the S tier position. This book has had such an influence on my life, not only just in business, but in my personal life too. I find myself constantly referencing this, talking about the different roles and building systems within my own life. So 10 out of 10 must read, in my opinion, especially if you are an entrepreneur or potentially want to go down that route. But this next book is one that gets a ton of hype on social media, but is it worth it? It's The Richest Man in Babylon by George S. Clason. It's definitely a classic with some timeless financial advice, like paying yourself first, avoiding bad debt, and of course, living below your means. Yes, all of those are extremely important concepts, but there's a big problem with this book in 2025, and that is the old school delivery. Written back in 1926, the ancient parable style and outdated language can make it tough for modern readers to really get a grasp on this one. And yes, while the lessons are extremely solid, they're also very broad, and that can leave you walking away without feeling like you have a clear action plan. So yes, this book is a good read for those who are looking to get the basics of personal finance and maybe managing their debt, things like that. But in terms of starting a business or investing in stocks, it's really not going to tell you anything about that. So for starters here, guys, with the pros, this teaches some very important foundational money lessons. This book lays out basic money truths that still hold up today. Pay yourself first, avoid bad debt, invest wisely, live below your means. Almost 100 years later, people are telling you to do the same exact thing. But here's the thing, if you're already doing all of that stuff, this book doesn't really leave you with much else. Another pro here is that this does have a memorable element, and that is the storytelling. That's something I do like about books in general, is when they teach lessons through stories. So that can be helpful, and it makes it a bit more engaging than just a typical how-to guide if you can get around the outdated language. And finally, my last pro is that this is an easy read. Most editions are going to be under 200 pages, some are even shorter. So if you're looking to just get an easy book out of the way to get started on something bigger, it's a really good book to just start out with. But of course, we have the con, the big con. It's the outdated language and outdated setting. This is going to be talking about things like purses and stones and jewelry, and it's just not relevant to today. So you really have to take those lessons and then apply them to modern examples. So guys, I hate to do it, but I'm going to be putting this book here in the C tier position. And don't get me wrong, guys, it's a great book, especially for being nearly a century old. But it really did leave me feeling like, that's it? So after being left with this feeling of wanting more, it led to me exploring this book right here, The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham. This classic book on value investing is often referred to as the Bible of investing. Warren Buffett says, and it's written at the very top, this is by far the best book about investing ever written. So let me just stop you right there, because I want you to keep all of this in mind when I assign a rating to this book here shortly, because I don't think it's possible for an investing book to be any more hyped than this one is right here. This book does a great job at teaching long-term value investing, but with that said, it's extremely dense, it's technical, and just not a good read for beginners in my opinion. With that said, guys, let's dive into the pros and cons, starting off with this pro here of timeless investment philosophy. Graham's concept of value investing, which is buying undervalued stocks and then holding them for the long term, is still relevant. The focus on fundamentals, margin of safety, and investor psychology is also very sound advice. There's also a huge pro here of understanding the investor versus the speculator. The distinction is crucial, and Graham teaches readers that not all people in the stock market are investors, and that there are also some called speculators. Investors look at something like a stock as a part ownership of a real business, while a speculator would think of it as a mere piece of paper or something like that they could bet on. Investors understand the underlying value of something, meanwhile speculators think that the value is only going to be determined by the price. This book teaches readers not to be speculators who chase hype, trends, and get-rich-quick opportunities, but instead to focus on long-term and value approaches to investing with discipline and patience. But with that said, there are some major cons to this book, starting off with the fact that it's extremely dense and technical, and it's just not a casual read. For beginners, especially coming from the world of YouTube finance or finance TikTok, this is literally probably going to feel like a textbook. In addition, it's going to require a high degree of financial literacy just to understand what's being talked about in this book. Another con here is going to be these outdated references in the book. It talks about examples of companies that were around in the mid-1900s. In addition, there's no discussion of index funds because they weren't around yet. So again, you're not going to also see ETFs, robo-advisors, or anything related to online brokerages. So for today's digital world of investing, it really is missing quite a bit. Guys, here's how we're going to rate The Intelligent Investor. If we treat this as a cover-to-cover read, which is how we're going to treat every book on this list, this is going to go in the D tier position for me. It's too long, it's too technical, and it's going to leave you feeling confused after hearing all of this hype surrounding it. With that said though, if you treat this book like a textbook or reference material, I would say it would move up to the C or potentially B tier position, because there are some great lessons that you can learn from this book. So guys, feel free to roast me in the comments if you disagree, but I think this is one that most casual readers can safely skip. Up next, guys, A Random Walk Down Wall Street is a must-read for anybody who is serious about the world of investing. It breaks down the case for index fund investing, debunks the myth of beating the market, and makes a compelling argument for playing the long game. It's not flashy, and it definitely won't hype you up, but this book will teach you the truth about how real wealth is made through the market and what works for most people. When I first got started in the world of investing, I was obsessed with picking stocks and trying to beat the market. This book, among others, helped me realize why that was the wrong approach entirely. But with that said, guys, it is a little bit dry at times, and because it's an investing book, it doesn't directly talk about business or entrepreneurship, so a bit of foreshadowing, it's not going to be quite S tier. Before we rate it though, let's talk about where it shines and where it falls flat. So the first pro here is the index investing explained clearly. Index fund investing is what works best for most people, and you can look into the numbers on this on your own or just pick up a copy of this book, but I like that it steers people away from the world of picking individual stocks. This book dispels an important myth that it's easy to go out there and beat the market. Instead, it's extremely difficult and very rare to consistently beat the return of the stock market. So this book can be a great option for people who are just bombarded on social media with people trying to get you into day trading, stock options, derivatives, whatever it might be. It's a great refresh. And guys, we do have to talk about the cons. The main one, in my opinion, is that this book is still a little bit dry. Not necessarily as dry as The Intelligent Investor, but it's no page turner. For those who are looking to get moving on something, it's not as energizing or actionable as other finance books out there, but I do think it's a solid read for anybody who's entering the world of investing, especially if you have this idea in mind of trying to beat the market. So guys, it's time to rate the book. I'm going to go ahead and put this one in the B tier position, and here's why. This book is more of a what not to do in the world of investing, showing you what you want to be staying away from. This book really serves to caution investors against hype, and that can make you feel less hyped about investing in general. But with that said, the principles are very true, and it's important at some point in your life to learn about index funds as well as passive investing, and this book will teach you exactly that. And guys, I have one more bone to pick with a book that is extremely popular. That is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. First published in 1937, this book is based on 25 years of the author studying 500 successful individuals, including Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, and Thomas Edison. What he was looking at in particular is what made these individuals successful. The biggest concept in this book is that success actually starts with the mind, not the wallet, not anything else. So guys, before I rate it, here's the good and the bad. A major pro here is the mindset shift that this book can help you with. The core premise that thoughts shape your reality is going to be important for entrepreneurs and anybody who's looking to just be successful in general. I definitely agree that you need to believe in yourself and anything that you're looking to achieve. This book is highly inspirational and it really fires you up. I mean, heck, it was one of the big reasons why I quit my job and went full-time with my content business. But honestly, guys, the pros end there, and we need to talk about some serious cons. The biggest con for me is that this book is very light on practical financial advice, despite the title Think and Grow Rich. A lot of people think it's going to tell you about becoming rich, talking about budgeting, money management, investing, things like that, and it doesn't. Instead, it's going to tell you that you need to think rich to become rich, and it's not going to show you how to actually go out and do it. And finally, another major con here is that this book is just so overhyped in the self-help industry. I think it leaves people with this false belief that all they have to do is get their mindset to be right, and then they're suddenly going to be successful, that they don't need to go out and do anything else, like start a business or these other very important steps. So as far as the ranking goes for this one, guys, I'm going to catch some flack for this, but I'm putting Think and Grow Rich in the C tier position. For starters, guys, having the word rich in the title has and always will confuse people about thinking this is some type of personal finance book. While your mindset does have some level of influence over your money, this book can be a little bit misleading for some. The biggest con for this book for me is I've seen it bring people down the law of attraction rabbit hole, and that's where you just think that you need to be envisioning yourself as worthy of achieving things instead of going out and actually making those things happen. I'm always more about action versus mindset, but that's just me, so I am being a little critical of this one. But let me know what you guys think about this tier list down in the comment section below. I'd love to hear what you think I got right, but more importantly, what you disagree with too. And if you want to check out my book, From Side Hustle to Main Hustle to Millionaire, you can find it anywhere that you read or listen to books today. If you're looking for more financial wisdom, be sure to check out this next video here from NerdWallet, because that's exactly what we do here. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.